For this next project, which is the number match game, we're going to rely on using quite a lot of images. You can use your own images for this course, but I also have provided a images folder if you want to use the same ones as me. If you head over to GitHub and head over to the repository for this course, which is funjavascriptprojects.com, you will then be taken to a page where we can download the full code, which will include all of the projects and also the stepped solutions and also any assets. From here, we can download the zip file to get the complete bundle. And then once downloaded, if we go into the number match game, you will see an images folder. There will also be the code solutions for each video too. And this is going to be the game which we're going to be creating. So it's a pretty simple user interface. We just have two sections. We have a welcome section where we're going to click on the play button to get started. So the whole idea of this project is we're going to cycle through a number of images. We'll then have a certain amount of items in each one of these images, such as 2 cards or 8 birthday candles. And then the user needs to decide if the number on the left is the same amount of items as in the picture. So for example, we have 2 peppers, so this will be correct. We click on the tick. This is 7 paintbrushes, so that would be wrong, and we can click on the X. So the timescale for each one of these images is going to be also set inside the project. So this is completely adjustable. If we want the game to be more difficult, we can reduce the time down, and we can also increase it to make the game more simple. The game is effectively over when we've cycled through all of the images. In our case, we provided 20 images in the images folder. So once we get through 20 of these, we'll then get a screen at the end which tells the user how many they've got correct. So over to the desktop and let's create a new project folder. And the name of this one is going to be number match. Drag this over into your text editor. And we can begin with a new file, which is going to be the index.html. So to begin, we need our HTML structure, and I'm going to use the built-in emmet command, which is HTML5, and then add a document title, which is number match. Let's right click and copy the path and paste this into a new browser tab. Let's get to work inside of our body section, and this is going to contain one main section, which is going to be the main wrapper for all of the content. We're also going to make use of this inside of JavaScript, so we can give this a unique ID. I'm going to go for game area. And this main section is going to consist of 2 main areas. We're going to have the stats section, which is on the left. And on the right, we're going to have the image area. These can go into 2 separate divs. The first one is for the left-hand side, so the class of stats. The second div is going to be for the image area, so a class of image area. These are our 2 main wrappers for our game area, and we're going to begin on the left-hand side, which is the stats. Taking a look at the final version here, we're going to have a score. This is going to be updated dynamically as the user gets these right or wrong. We're then going to have a number, which is going to be randomly generated, the name of the image, and then our 2 buttons. Also, just as a side note too, when we'll get to this later, the number which is generated just here, this is going to be either the exact amount of items in the image, or it's going to be one higher or one lower. This is to make the game a little bit more challenging. For example, we don't want to see 10 items on the screen and then a number of ones compared to, since this would make the game pretty simple. So in the stats area, let's open up this div. And we can begin at the very top with a level 3 heading. This was the text of score. The user score will be something such as 2/20, but these 2 areas are going to be dynamic. So the first one, we can create a span element. Let's give this an ID, which is going to be our current score. Just after the /, this can be a dynamic section too. So a second span element. And this is going to have the ID, which is going to be equal to total available. This is going to be the total amount of points which is available, which is the same number of images we're going to have. We can also add some placeholder values just to make this more visible. So let's go for 2 and 20. And this is how it looks inside the browser. The next thing to do is to move down to our next section. If we click on play, this is going to be the number of items in the image, followed by the 2 buttons. So let's do this under the level 3 heading. The text is going to have the class of items. This is so we can add some styling inside of the CSS. Again, this is going to be 2 dynamic sections. We're going to have the randomly generated number, which is either the number of items, one higher or one lower. So let's do this inside of a span with the ID of number. We can add a placeholder value inside here. And then a second span with the ID, which is equal to item name. A placeholder value inside of here, so this will be the images, so let's go for 6 ducks. And a space in between. Next up, just after the P element, we can add a new div section, which is going to be the wrapper for our 2 buttons. So the class which is going to be used in the CSS, this is going to be equal to match buttons. Then our first button. The first symbol we're going to use, or the first character, is going to be the tick, which is going to be used as a HTML entity with the code of the ampersand, the hash, 10003, followed by the semicolon. The second button, which is going to be a cross, and this is going to be a HTML entity code, which is the ampersand, the hash, 10007, and the semicolon. The next stage is to add the image area, which is going to be the right-hand side. So currently, when we're just adding the HTML, this may look a little messy because we need to create 2 sections. We need to create this welcome screen, and we also need to create the image section once the game is in play. We'll use JavaScript to show and hide these 2 sections. So let's start. If we go down to our second div just after the stats, which is image area, we'll get to work with our welcome screen to begin. At the very top, we're going to add a level 3 heading, which is going to have the ID of message. This is going to be a empty level 3 heading, and we'll use JavaScript later on to add a message, which is going to tell the user their score. This section will also only be available at the end of the game. Next up, a div section, and this is going to be the wrapper for our start screen. So inside here, this is just going to be all the content we see at the beginning. We'll then hide this and then begin the game. So to keep this unique, we can add an ID, which is equal to the start screen. And the contents to begin will be a level 1 heading. And this is the text which we see right at the very top. Also notice how the word number of match is also emphasized. So let's add this in. And then we can wrap the number match in the M elements. The next section is also emphasized too, so we can say the rules are simple. Again, inside the M elements. And then all of the rest of the text is going to be in the P elements. The next 2 lines are going to be prefixed with a HTML entity for this little arrow. And this is going to have the entity code, which is equal to the ampersand, the hash, 9654, and then the semicolon, followed by the text of hit thumbs up if the number of items matches the displayed number. After this, a second P element. We're going to again use the same HTML entity code as above. We can add this in, and the text is thumbs down if no match. The third one, which is the last line of text, is you have then a certain number of seconds to decide. This number is also going to be dynamic, so we can change this in the JavaScript. So we need to wrap this number in a span, which is going to have the ID of time setting. So within the P element, you have, and then create a span element with this ID. You can add a number inside of here if you want, followed by seconds to decide. And let's see how this looks inside the browser. This all looks fine, and just to help us out with the CSS later on, we're also going to add a class to each one of these lines of text. This is going to be a spacing class where we're going to add some spacing on the top and bottom. So let's go over to our lines of text. And we'll start with the first line underneath the title. I'm going to give this a class, which is space-y, since this is responsible for adding some spacing on the y-axis. So copy this and paste this in the P elements just below. And this will give us some consistent spacing when we add our styling. After this, we also have a play button down at the bottom. So still within this div section, a button with the ID of play button, the text of play. And this is now all the content we need for this welcome screen. The next thing we need to do is to add a placeholder image, which is going to be for effectively the next screen. If we take a look at the finished version just here, all we need to do here is to rotate or cycle through any of these images. So all we need, and this is just a placeholder, if we go underneath the button, and then outside of our start screen section. So a new div, which is going to be the wrapper for this image, with the ID of image container. So we're going to create an image dynamically using JavaScript, but for now we can add a placeholder image just so we can see how everything looks when we come to add our CSS. So first of all, we can go to the images folder and then / and the name of any of our images. I'm going to go for the macaroons. We can leave the alt text for now since this is going to be removed very soon. Next, we need to actually add these images into our project folder. So we can use the same images which I've used in this course, or you can download your own. So I'm going to paste these into our number match project. And this should now leave us with an image. So it does look a little messy since these two sections will be swapped. And we also need to add some CSS styling, which we're going to do in the next video.